Chapter 9. Caa Iss. Amira awoke to stirring in the apartment. She had fallen asleep on the floor of her bedroom, near the window, still clutching the knife. The rustle of a smock and a cheerful hum assured her it was neither Dangerith nor the captain of Vesha's Cadrahan. Amira nearly sighed with relief and stuffed the knife under the edge of the curtains. The bedroom door opened to one of the younger handmaidens, carrying a bundle of starched linens. She caught sight of Amira and started. "Milady," she gasped. "Is something wrong? Why were you asleep on the floor?" The bed was too soft. Amira didn't really expect the servant girl to believe her, but no convincing lie came to hand. She'd lived lies for her whole life, but always the same ones. Those lies were carefully crafted fortresses that she had fortified daily. Crafting a lie now out of thin air was like reinventing bricks. She didn't want to confess that she'd spent hours after Darrigan had gone, praying to Eponine. She hadn't had the proper votives to burn, but considering the circumstances, Amira hoped the goddess wouldn't be picky. "Oh." The maid didn't press the matter, but she didn't seem convinced. "Shall I have the mattress packed tighter? Send for a new one?" "I'm fine," Amira said. The maid cleared her throat. "Well." She opened her mouth again, but Shazni's voice came from the other room. "Melody, is her ladyship there?" "Yes, Mistress Shazni." The tanned young woman appeared beside the maid. Shazni's eyebrows quirked as she noted Amira rising from the floor near the window, but she made no comment. "I think you ought to change, my lady." Shazni stepped past Amira into the boudoir. "It will soon be time for luncheon, and Her Majesty may have plans for supper." Amira cringed at the thought of being trapped again in the presence of the empress and her Cadrahan. What would happen if she repeated Darrigan's words to the empress? Either Vesha wouldn't believe Amira, and Darrigan would likely kill her for outing him. Or Vesha would believe her, and Darrigan would still find a way to kill her for outing him. Neither option was especially appealing. A crash sounded from the other room, and Amira and both the servants jumped. Boots clomped into the apartment, steps uneven, as if the intruder were drunk. "Amira!" Dangerith shouted. "Amira!" He battered into the apartment and slammed the door after him, rattling the doorframe. The assassin glanced to Shazni, but the maid's frown of confusion mirrored her own. Amira inhaled a breath and dared make her way toward the parlor and Dangerith's voice. Had he found out about Darrigan's visit last night and come to reprimand her? She wasn't sure how the events of last night were her fault. But Imperials could have strange logic at times. "Amira, are you here?" His voice cracked, like his throat was hoarse from a terrible sickness. Amira peered out the bedroom door into the parlor. Dangerith had both hands braced against the mantel over the fireplace, like a man caught in a fever dream. His clothes were rumpled, and his hair stuck out in all directions, like he'd been trying to rip it out. He reminded her of a raver she'd once seen in the coastal city of Cadrine. No sooner had the assassin opened her mouth to speak than Shazni came up behind her. "Milady, do you—" "Leave us." Dangerith jerked away from the fireplace and spun around to face the women. Deep circles bruised his swollen eyes. Shazni hesitated, and the archduke's jaw tensed. "Leave us," he roared. The command glanced off Amira, as her curse recognized that it wasn't for her. All the same, she fought the impulse to flee. Something instinctive and primal told her to flee after the girls, to get away from the archduke and whatever simmered behind his eyes, but she stood her ground. Shazni and the other maid scurried past him and out the door, like the good little servants they were. They cowered and didn't look back. The door shut behind them, leaving her alone with the archduke. Amira watched him, even if a part of her wished she still had the knife. It was improper for him to be here in her apartments, much less here alone while she was still in last night's dressing gown. Dangerous had always been courteous and genteel, but in his current state, she didn't know what to expect. She had seen him stressed before, tense, troubled, but never this agitated. The archduke strode to her in 3 quick steps. Amira braced herself, half expecting a blow, but he seized her hands, fingers locking around hers in a death grip. He pressed his forehead against her shoulder, and a shudder went through him, strong enough she thought he might fall to the floor. Amira froze. Her heart did something odd in her chest, and she was so aware of his warm hands enveloping hers. He smelled strongly of dirt and sweat, but with the underlying scent of sage and new parchment. Dangerous took another heaving breath. "What's wrong?" she whispered, almost afraid to speak. Some part of her feared her voice might break whatever shred of control he had. "He's angry." Dangerous's words came out broken, disjointed. "Who?" Amira asked softly, though she knew. "He wants me to kill you." There was no threat in the archduke's words, but fear tightened Amira's gut. "Who?" "He says you'll find a way to kill me if I keep you longer. But I'd rather you kill me than—" Dangerous's words broke off in a shudder. "It might be best if you killed me," he mused. "If you can do nothing else." "What are you talking about?" Amira's heart sped up, fear and confusion tying her into knots. Dangerous shook his head against her shoulder. "Highness?" "I can't." The archduke groaned. Amira stood still, letting him hold on to her. She didn't know what else to do. Closing her eyes, she tried to relax. They would be married soon if the archduke decided to go through with it, and then she would have to let him do far more than this. He stayed bowed over her shoulder, forehead pressed into her sleeve. He ordered the servants out and stormed in here with no reason, and he used that power to simply hold her. Finally, the archduke straightened. His grip on her hands loosened, but he didn't let go. The ghost of a smile passed across his face. "I'll be fine in a moment." Amira studied the archduke. There was raw vulnerability in his distress, a kind of need she didn't understand. Somewhere between a plea for help and a demand. He needed her. That realization was strange. Not unpleasant, but strange. They were alone and close. Very close. She hadn't been this close to someone in a long time. Men were one of many pleasures she'd been denied as a Kadrahan. Her father hadn't wanted her to have any entanglements, and had given her commands against it after the incident with Corman. She still wasn't sure exactly how he'd heard about it. But her father's commands were voided as soon as he handed her off. Dangerous would be a generous lover. She was sure of it. Gentle, giving, and... Dangerous studied their joined hands, not daring to meet her gaze. He no longer trembled, but that didn't erase the deep lines or dark half-moons beneath his eyes. He looked more like a vagabond than an archduke. "What's wrong?" Dangerous shook his head. "Highness?" The archduke became abruptly fascinated by the dead fireplace. "Amira, please." Dangerous raised their hands between them in supplication. "Please. I'm trying to protect you." Amira's nostrils flared. "Protect me. You dragged me from my country, my home." "They abused you there, used you for your power." "And you aren't using me," Amira spat. "I don't know how, or for what, or what you plan, but you are using me." She shook their hands between them. "I'm still as much a slave here as I was to King Hyle. What do you want with me?" Amira demanded, her voice rising. "And what are you? Why did my father want you dead? And why does Darrigan?" "I know it doesn't seem like it, but I am trying to protect you." It was a good thing Amira had left the knife in the other room, or else she would have stabbed the archduke right there. "You aren't protecting me. Stop deluding yourself." She couldn't tell him about Darrigan outright. "My stepmother attacked me because you chose me. Every noble house with a nubile daughter hates me, I know it. Perhaps they could accept you marrying a borderland princess, but an Istavari bastard?" Her voice rose to a shrill pitch. "In a few weeks, I'm supposed to share my bed with a madman, but you are protecting me." Dangerous flinched. "I didn't say I was good at it." Amira yanked her hands out of his. A low groan escaped him, and he doubled over. Gasping, he went down, and his knees hit the floor. "Highness?" She grabbed one of his hands. "Dangerous?" Dangerous gripped her hand in both of his. He knelt on the floor, panting, but at least he wasn't doubled over anymore. Amira gaped at the archduke before her. Some thick and heavy emotion stabbed at her as she realized she had hurt him. Somehow. Dangerous kept his head down and clung to her. He trembled, still kneeling. "Dangerous?" Amira almost whispered the name. Half of her wanted to back away and flee, but the other half churned with some sympathetic and protective emotion. "Are you all right?" The archduke's shoulders rose and fell in steady gasps. Amira touched his sweaty temple. He was feverishly hot. The archduke leaned into her, seeking her touch. She didn't think she'd ever had a man so vulnerable in her life. Certainly not of his own volition. Her caress soothed him, calmed him. That both frightened her and stirred up another emotion that was warm and golden and alien. "What's happening?" Amira whispered. The archduke heaved a sigh. A deep, defeated sigh like that of a duelist yielding to a worthy opponent. "All right," he said, clambering back to his feet, never releasing her hand. "All right. I'll tell you." Amira waited. It was hard to know if the archduke was collecting his thoughts or wanted her to speak first. Dangerous straightened and let a long breath out his nose. Again, Amira thought he looked suddenly like an old emperor, worn with years of reign, not a young archduke who hadn't even begun. He didn't make eye contact, but Amira could see that they were earthy brown, human. "Do you trust me, Amira?" The assassin hesitated. "I've never lied to you. I know you don't believe that, but I haven't." The archduke examined the ink-stained fingers of his right hand, stalling. Nor do I plan to. This is going to sound like madness, but it's the truth. Amira took a deep breath. Everything about their relationship was madness. Why would the explanation be different? Go on. Despite his promise, he was in no rush to reveal his secrets. When my father conquered Highlandale, he cleared his throat. Or rather, Highlandale surrendered. Yes, Amira tightly answered. Her father had bowed before the Empire without a fight, groveling like a whipped puppy in exchange for the occasional pat on the head. The outlying cities, villages, and farms surrendered, and every clan in the Highlands came to swear fealty to the Empire. Many came reluctantly, but they came. All except one. Amira tensed, and it was her turn to look away. The Istavari. She had been a child, but this story was burned in her memory, like the scorched earth in the wake of Aramea's armies. Dangerith nodded. You probably know more than I of what happened there. The sorceresses took their husbands and sons to the castle at Acre's Gap. It marks the beginning of the Cursewood now, Amira said absently. She'd gone back a few years ago to see it. The edge of the boundary that separated Highlandale from the mountains beyond. Now the territory of the sorceresses in the north. Obsidian vines, spiked with thorns, some wider across than 6 men standing on one another's shoulders, burst up out of the rocks like stone pustules. They had long since overtaken the fortress, breaking through the walls and knocking down the towers, including the tower. Dangerith nodded. You know what happened. When the sorceresses were cornered and their cause spent. I know, Amira said shortly. She should never have cut off an archduke, much less her future husband. But they were alone, and propriety had long since been left in a cloud of dust. Amira had the scars on her arms to prove what the sorceresses had done. They ran out of Caa. Amira shuddered. Memories of dark stone halls packed with whimpering women flashed across her mind. Many of the men volunteered and opened their veins so that the sorceresses could keep defending the walls, but she cleared her throat. It wasn't enough. Dangerith nodded, mouth pressed in a tight grimace. I'm sorry. He didn't ask if she had been there. He didn't ask what she had seen. Yet there was a softness to his words that told her he knew. The assassin raised her chin, resisting the impulse to pull down her sleeves, but they were already pulled all the way past her wrists. They cast a curse. Yes. Dangerith nodded again. The curse would. But there was another one. The curse on my father. Amira met his eyes then. Still that soft brown. This much she had known. A muscle in his cheek throbbed as he clenched his jaw. It was a wonder he had any teeth left. This curse. He calls himself Caa Iss. Amira's whole body tensed at that name, though she had never heard it before. Caa Iss? Yes, he. Dangerith frowned. He infected my father the night during the final siege. Amira fought back her own memories of the final siege, smoke, tears, and a knife in her grandmother's hands. My father was able to control him for a few months, but then... Dangerith shook his head. He lost control one night, and the demon attacked my mother. He beat her so badly she couldn't walk for a week. The archduke squeezed Amira's hands tighter. When my father returned to his own mind, He sent for the most trusted Kadrahan. Derigan. You met him last night. You have no idea, Amira thought to herself. He ordered Derigan to kill him right then and there. Dangerith looked away. Now I understand why. A few years later, I turned 11. He cleared his throat. Suddenly I wasn't alone in my mind or body anymore. I don't know why it took so long, but I inherited my father's curse. Amira's gut clenched. Istavari boys go through the first rites of manhood at 11. Dangerith let off a bitter laugh. Well, that's one mystery solved, I suppose. This was madness. Utter madness. Yet she had seen the insanity of her grandmother and the other women there at the end. When they had seen they were defeated, that they would be crushed by the emperor or hunted to the ends of the earth if they did not take a Kadrahan's oath, they had been willing to break every law and pervert every rule if only to make their enemies suffer. What is Caa Iss? Amira whispered. Dangerith was quiet for a long time. Amira had begun to think he wouldn't respond, but then the archduke took a breath. He's a Sith-Raul, and he lives inside me. Sith-Raul. Amira echoed the name with a soft gasp. She wouldn't have believed it a month ago, but those eyes, that voice, the way he had healed overnight from burns that should have disfigured him for life. Yes. Dangerith shivered, watching her reaction with a fevered intensity, while not looking directly at her, as if he feared she would lash out at him or call him a liar. One of the Riven ones. The Archduke nodded slowly. Yes. She'd had her suspicions. She'd stitched together fragments of conversations and clues from the past few weeks. But she'd hardly been able to believe it. Now, hearing it spoken out loud was like the final thread, weaving everything together. Sith-Raul were denizens of the Underrealm, the Dread Marches, the children of Moraine. Many had studied and tried to harness them for power with greatly mixed results. Amira knew little else of the demons aside from the fact that their greatest desire was human bodies. They had frequently been documented exchanging favors, loyalty, and sometimes even abyssal powers in exchange for a body to inhabit. Without bodies, they were unable to leave the Dread Marches. Amira wanted to mock Dangerith, wanted to say that this was all lies, and yet the words settled into the same space of her mind as her name, the color of the sky, and the feel of water on her skin. His words were truth. Caa Iss was real, and she knew it. As a girl, Sith-Raul had been a ghost story, something the older children and vindictive nursemaids mentioned to frighten her and the younger ones. As a girl trying to learn spells from moldering books and cracked scrolls, Sith-Raul had been mentioned as only a footnote, a testament to a forgotten age. Sith-Raul had once been human, or at least had bodies, according to legend. They had been torn or riven from their flesh, and while there were many different stories that gave different reasons, for whatever reason, they hadn't passed into the third heaven where souls were meant to go. The Sith-Raul had instead descended into the Dread Marches, the space between this life and the next. Amira was silent, thinking on all that would have had to happen to make Dangerith's story real. A sorceress would have had to open a doorway into the Dread Marches, extract a single spirit and bind it to the late emperor. That would involve keeping the doorway open long enough to summon and bind a Sith-Raul, but then shut it soon enough that the path between worlds wouldn't fracture both the sorceress and untold leagues of the surrounding countryside. Besides that, one would have had to secure enchantments on the spirit to keep it from fleeing or possessing the sorceress herself. Then one would need to keep back the scores of other spirits that, by all accounts, would be clamoring for a chance at new bodies and freedom. Not one sorceress, Amira realized. A circle of sorceresses, like those that had been trapped in the tower. Amira. Dangerous shifted. Please say something. What's it like? Was the first thing past her lips. Having Caa Iss. She touched his temple. In there. Most of the time, I can suppress him. But I feel him fighting for control every moment. Dangerous eyes flitted across her face. Sometimes, like the night we met, he takes over completely. Fear rattled down Amira's spine, but she wouldn't let this creature frighten her now. Amira licked her lips, studying the archduke. You can feel him right now? As we're talking? Dangerous faltered. No. Amira's brow furrowed. What? That night, when you burned me. Dangerous looked a little sheepish, though she'd been the one to attack him. It was like he was cut off. I thought, gods, for just a few glorious minutes I thought I was cured. He shook his head. Then you were gone, and Caa Iss was back, angrier than ever. Amira was quiet. That made no sense, and yet it did. If her Istavari mothers had been the ones to bind the demon. Then, that night in Lashera, at the party, suddenly he went quiet, and I knew you were there. Amira didn't know what to say. 100 thoughts and ideas and questions whirred through her skull. I've tried potions, spells, exorcists, everything you can think of to rid me of my demon. But you are the only thing that's even come close. He cradled her hand and ever so slowly traced the patterns on her palm. It was a simple gesture, chaste enough. And yet in that second it was the most intimate touch she'd ever experienced. Dangerous had bared himself to her. Amira's heart sped up, and she couldn't say if it was fear or anger or perhaps something else. Dangerous had never given an order that she let him touch her. For now she had the power to reject him. So why didn't she pull her hand away? His brow furrowed, some heavy emotion lining his face once more. I know it's selfish, Amira, and I'm putting you in danger. And I'm sorry, but I don't know what else to do. Dangerous squeezed her hand. With Caa Iss, the Empire is in danger. Without me, the Empire's stability is threatened. You are the only way they can have one and not the other. Amira thought to Darrigan's implied command. Would killing Dangerous be the best thing for him? Would it be the best thing for the world? His father had certainly thought as much. But Emperor Tristan hadn't had a remedy for the demon. Dangerous studied their hands like there was some puzzle in the folds of their fingers. When I'm near you, it does something. It's like he's mute. Dangerous yawned again, covering his mouth. The dark circles over his cheekbones and the lines on his forehead stood out even more. Did you sleep at all last night? Amira asked. No, Dangerous said. If I did, I had nightmares of being awake. How do you live? It's not usually this bad, but Caa Iss was angry about you meeting the empress. Amira wondered if that was because of the surrounding implications, or because of something else. You really do plan to marry me? She said, a little surprised to hear the words herself. Despite what I did, because of the demon. I didn't know how else to take you with me without causing an international incident." Amira barked a laugh, as if her assassination attempt hadn't been exactly that. "I appreciate that. At least I know now why you picked a bastard sorceress over a pedigreed princess." A beat of silence passed between them, while Dangerth's jaw worked, as if he was assembling the words in his mouth. "Your sister is a sweet girl." Amira curled her lip. Sweet. One might think it was the greatest of all virtues by the way people praised Fanra for it. "But I never wanted to marry her, especially after I met her. She couldn't take Caa Iss, and I didn't want to ask her to." "But?" Dangerth grimaced. "The Empire needs heirs." He looked down. Sithraul or not, they would expect Amira to bear heirs for Dangerth. Sons to carry on the bloodline, and the curse, apparently. For a moment, the sorceress in her took over, and she wondered, as she was sure Dangerth had, if perhaps the curse couldn't pass into an Istavari bloodline. Perhaps this was the way to cut it off. Dangerth was still talking. "And I hoped that, with Highlandales so close to the Cursewood, perhaps I might be able to make peace with the Istavari one day. I still hope that." He shrugged. "Most likely, I would have destroyed your sister. But I have hope that you can destroy me, if you need to." Amira didn't know what to say to that. Dangerth seemed content to wait. He yawned again. "You need rest," Amira said. It wasn't the best response to what he had just shared, but she could think of nothing better. The Archduke shrugged. "I won't be getting any rest if Caa Iss has a say in it." "You could sleep here." Dangerth's bloodshot eyes sprang open. "On the couch," Amira quickly added, face flushing. "I'm not suggesting—" She trailed off, hating that she was flustered. "But if you can't sleep when he's harassing you, and he can't harass you when you're with me, there we are." "I don't want to sully your reputation," Dangerth said, frowning. Amira laughed again, more bitterly this time. "You think of that after you come into my rooms alone and order all the servants out?" "I'm sorry." The assassin shook her head. "From what the empress said, that's already what everyone thinks of me." Dangerth grasped her other hand. "I'm sorry." "Don't be. For all you know, the rumors are true. And I'm every bit the whore my stepmother thought." "What do you mean?" "She was convinced I slept with you to get you to choose me." Amira couldn't look Dangerth in the eye for a moment. "You did nothing wrong to get me to choose you," Dangerth said flatly, as if she didn't know that. "At least, nothing your curse wouldn't have forced you to do." "And yet here I am," Amira sniffed. "It's like they say, no good deed goes unpunished." Dangerth shook his head, awkwardly motioning between them. "This isn't a punishment, Amira." "A reward, then?" Amira's nostrils flared. "You never asked me if I wanted to be empress." "Do you?" Dangerth's voice was soft, treacherously soft. He watched her closely. He cared about the answer, she realized. But he shouldn't. "What I want doesn't matter." Amira resisted the urge to pull her hand away from him. "I'm your Kadrahan, and you're the Archduke, remember? You will get what you want." "What you want matters to me." Dangerth's thumb stroked the back of her hand. "What do you want, Amira?" Amira hadn't really thought about it. She tried not to think about things she couldn't control, and whether she became empress or was executed as a traitor, Her fate was in the hands of the imperial family. I don't know. Dangerous lowered his head and exhaled a long breath. For a moment, she thought he would press the matter. Then he said, I will take up your offer of a couch, if you don't mind. Good. The archduke finally released her hands. Amira felt the absence of his touch like a gust of wind. Can I trust you not to stab me in my sleep? Dangerous asked, half joking from his tone. Amira gave him a look that wasn't quite a smile. The archduke didn't order her not to stab him as he sprawled over her couch, arranging a few of the decorative pillows under his head. For an archduke, it seemed rather provincial. Not sure what else to do, Amira settled into the armchair near his head. There was more cushioning in the seat of that chair than any bed she had occupied as a child. She perched stiffly on the edge, thinking she should have grabbed a book from off the shelves before sitting down, but doubted she would have been able to focus on it. Everything made sense now. She'd pieced parts of it together, but now she had confirmation. Why he had wanted her. Why there wasn't a mark on him from her attack. Did the demon always accelerate healing, or just when he was in control? It also explained what Darrigan had meant, about it being a favor to Dangerous to kill him. Amira hated the entire situation. Hated it so completely and wholly. The tick of the mantel clock marked the crawling minutes. The archduke's breathing leveled, and he relaxed. Amira's back ached and her neck grew stiff, but she held her position. She had once spent 12 hours nestled in the branches of a sequoia, waiting for a Fakrinian ambassador to pass in range of her bow. She could wait a half hour for an Aramaean archduke to fall asleep. Dangerous's breathing grew steadier and softer. His face had a boyishness when he slept. It occurred to her how young he was, how young they both were. Darrigan was right. Her father was right. Even Cromwell had agreed with this. Dangerous was a good man, yet the thing inside him was anything but. She quelled the demon for now, but what if something changed? What if Caa Iss took over Dangerous again, and this time there was no shoving him back down? The thought of that thing as emperor sent shudders down her spine. She understood then why Vesha had kept headship of the empire for so long. Why there had been no talk of coronating the rightful heir. Dangerous himself might be fit to rule, but that thing? Once she was certain he was indeed asleep, Amira steeled herself and rose to her feet. She fetched Darrigan's knife from under the drapes in the bedroom, fighting down nausea. She gripped it until the hilt's etching imprinted on her skin. Just because he'd spoken kindly to her and given her a few pretty dresses didn't mean he owned her. Even if he had the tether to her curse, that didn't mean he owned her. She adjusted her grip on the knife again and again. The hilt didn't seem to quite fit in her hand. If she did this right, Dangerous would simply never wake. She desperately wanted to get this right. Once it was done, well, she would worry about that later. This was what was best for everyone. For Fawnra, for Highlandale, and for Dangerous. Her own life had been counted as a loss a long time ago. As a Cadrahan, she would spend the rest of her life killing and hurting as it suited whatever man or woman held her leash. She wondered if her tether would go back to her father after Dangerous was dead. Amira watched the gentle rise and fall of his chest. So at peace, so at ease. She wanted to curl up beside him and soak in that peace. Cursed prince and heir to a damned throne, forced to fight for control of his own body, yet kind. Cromwell had once told her servants treated their master the way their master treated them. If a man was always trying to cheat his staff, they would always try to cheat him. If he was suspicious, and convinced they were plotting against him, he would most likely be proven right sooner rather than later. King Hyle's servants respected him, served well, and were generally honest. But Dangereth's were truly loyal. She had seen that in Talon, Badred, Chosney, his attendants from the road, and even his guards. They protected him, kept his secrets, and guarded him with their lives. Dangereth was loved by the people who had seen him at his worst. And why wouldn't they? Dangereth had been cursed, same as she was. He couldn't help it. But where her curse had shattered her into sharp edges and left her with smoldering rage, Dangereth's had made him kind. All that pain, terror, and anger, and it had made him kind. Or perhaps he had always been kind and had refused to let the curse change him. Either way, it was easy to see why so many loved him, why so many would die for him. She watched him, her breathing slowing to match the rhythm of his. Strong jaw and angled cheekbones, and body sculpted as if by a master artisan. He was beautiful, too. Dangereth was everything the bards and historians wanted archdukes to be, even with his demon. She should hate him. She should want to kill him. His father had taken everything from her and her people, but she couldn't hate him. He would do far more good in this world than her, curse or no curse. He already had. She furiously scrubbed her face with her hands. "I've stopped so many hearts," she whispered, her voice hoarse. Dangereth went on dozing, his Caa a steady glow. "But with you, I can't." She raked back her hair and squeezed her eyes shut. Amira stood, her jaw locked, her mind made up. She wasn't killing Dangereth, even if it cost her own life. Maybe if she died for his sake, she would be redeemed enough to buy herself leniency in the afterlife. Not that it was her first plan. The assassin marched to the nearest window and dropped the knife over the sill. It disappeared into the garden below. Maybe she should have held on to the only weapon she'd had since Highlandale, but she didn't want to be caught with it. That would raise too many questions. Besides, her real enemy couldn't be hurt by blades. Amira watched as Dangereth slept. It had been a good 2 hours since she disposed of the knife and had held vigil ever since. She'd fought a battle against Dangereth and lost. It was a different sort of battle than the one countless lords and kings had lost against his father. But the defeat was no less sound. The archduke dozed peacefully. The sun cast a halo over his mussed hair. He looked like one of the angels from the cathedrals come to life. Amira rubbed her nose. She knew little more about Sith Raoul than a fireside storyteller. They had never been a serious topic of study. Nonetheless, she expected it would take far, far more than her skill and anything she could conjure to get rid of one. But if her presence neutralized the Sith Raoul, then there must be some way to make it permanent. At least she hoped as much. "Have you been there this whole time?" Dangereth's voice was thick with sleep. He pushed himself off the cushions, fumbling into the sitting position. Amira whirled on him like a caught thief. "It would seem so." Dangereth's mouth pressed into a wry grimace. "What?" Feeling suddenly as though she were being weighed and measured. "Nothing." Dangereth shook his head, stifling a yawn. "Do you feel better?" She hoped that would change the subject. "Much." He peered out the window. "What time is it?" Amira shot a quick glance to the mantel clock. "An hour or so to noon." Dangereth raked his fingers through his hair, and closed his eyes with a deep sigh. The assassin didn't have time for his meditation. "What about the Istavari spellbooks and tools you brought from Highlandale? Have you checked them? Is there anything in them?" "You don't know?" "My father never let me read them." Amira was a little surprised at the resentment that crept into her voice at that. She thought she didn't care. Dangerous angled his head to one side. A moment of silence passed between them. "I've been through them already. Me and a handful of the scholars at court. They don't know why they're looking, but they've found nothing." She supposed she shouldn't have been surprised. Why else would Dangerous have wanted the arsenal as part of Faunra's dowry? "Everything from fairy tales to ancient histories. And no one ever mentions a way to silence a Sith Raoul without excising it." "So do they mention exorcism?" The Archduke's shoulders slumped a little. "There are one or two scripts that mention it, but only in passing. All that is mentioned is that a trade of some sort has to be made." He shrugged. "It never specifies what kind or how." Amira inhaled. "If my mother's cast this curse, then the clue to undoing it could be in what they left behind." "We thought of that." Dangerous rubbed the back of his neck. "We've found nothing." "I should still see for myself." Dangerous was quiet for a full heartbeat. "My mother wouldn't like that." "Why?" "She thinks you could be influencing me, controlling the demon." Amira filed that away in her growing list of problems. "Well, I still want to see what I can learn about this creature." She had an objective now, a target beyond staying alive and keeping Faunra alive. She had to admit it felt good to have a mission again. "Nothing has ever worked before." Dangerous's tone was flinty, hard with a brittle edge. He smoothed his rumpled shirt. "You never had me before, now did you?" Amira stared him down, daring him to argue. Dangerous wasn't intimidated by her hostility, but then he never was. He tilted his head to one side, once again taking her in like she was a winged polecat or a fanged trout. "No," he conceded. "No, I never had you." His eyes lingered on hers. Silence stretched between them, and her heart thudded in her chest. Tingles spread up from the pit of her stomach again, and she caught herself staring at his lips. She really shouldn't be alone with him. Amira cleared her throat, looking away. "So tell me where the Istavari paraphernalia is being stored, and I'll begin." Dangerous spaced his words carefully, forming each one with deliberate clarity. "You're willing to help me?" Amira sniffed, folding her arms across her chest. "You could order me to do it anyway." "But I haven't ordered you," he said. "That's why I'm willing." Dangerous didn't respond for a moment. "Are you helping me because you want to, or because you expect I'll order you otherwise?" "Look, do you want my help or not?" Raking a hand through his hair, Dangerous sighed. "I believe most of the Istavari collection is being stored in a vault below the palace." "So how do we get in? We should probably find a way to look, without Vesha and her people knowing." "More specifically, Darrigan." Amira shot a surreptitious glance to the door, remembering they should keep their voices down. "If we can." Dangerous arched an eyebrow. "We?" "You or Talon or Thadrid. You can trust Talon and Thadrid, I presume?" "It hardly matters." Amira shrugged in an offhanded manner. "Yes, they're loyal to me." Amira thought back to how the two men had reacted to Dangerous screaming on the ground that night in the forest. They were used to seeing him grapple with the demon. They probably knew more about it than anyone.